Добрий день. I'm Solomia Vahi, violinist and artistic director of music at the Institute Concert Series at the Ukrainian Institute of America. Welcome to our second live broadcast from the Ukrainian Institute of America. Today we are collaborating with the Shevchenko Scientific Society in the US and presenting to you Pianist Pavel Gintov performing music of Ukrainian composer Serhiy Bortkevych. Serhiy Bortkevych was born in Kharkiv and educated in St. Petersburg and Leipzig. He was a refugee of two world wars and persecuted by both Nazi and Soviet regimes. He was unknown in Ukraine because most of his music was destroyed during World War II. He moved around and trying to escape the regimes, and he had lived in Crimea, Constantinople, Sofia, Belgrade, and finally settled in Vienna. In Vienna, he was very well respected, and after the war he was appointed as a chair of education programs at Vienna Conservatory. Also, in 1952, the newly formed Bortkiewicz Society celebrated composer's 75th birthday with a concert in the Musikverein Hall in Vienna. Now let's enjoy the music of Serhiy Bortkevych performed by Pavel Gintov.
Good afternoon. My name is Halina Hrin, and I'm the president of the Shevchenko Scientific Society in the United States. It is our great pleasure to co-sponsor this event today. The Music at the Institute series, or MATI as we know it, is entering its fourth decade of presenting world-class performances from its stately home in Manhattan at the Ukrainian Institute of America. By now, it has become the premier venue for presenting classical Ukrainian music to the American audience, and it is an honor for us to participate in this presentation of the music of Serhiy Bortkevych, performed by the wonderful pianist Pavel Gintov.
Hello, thank you very much for coming today, and to those who are watching us live online, thank you for tuning in. Today I'm going to play some piano works and talk about the life of a composer who I think deserves much more recognition than he currently has. Serhiy Bortkevych. This is a composer whose works have not been played much long after his death. His works had been banned during his lifetime, and his name had been deliberately erased from our cultural memory, and especially in his homeland in Ukraine. But let me start with his music, because nothing tells better about him than his music, and I'm going to start with two miniatures, two short pieces. The first one is called The Lyric Thought, and the second is one of his piano etudes. I think these two short pieces illustrate his style quite well. You heard a lot of lyricism in the first piece. That sounds a lot like something by Chopin, you probably noticed. And not because he's copying Chopin, but because he knows the style so well, he knows this language so well, so that he can create his own masterpieces in the same language. He was a great pianist. He played all those great romantic works for piano, and that affected his composition style a lot, because in his own music, he found all these influences in the pieces that he played as a pianist. So to tell you about him, I'm a musician from Ukraine. I studied professionally in Kyiv, and I had a class of Ukrainian music history over the years there, and never ever have heard his name mentioned, or never heard of his music performed back there. And it was in the 90s. And Bortkiewicz died in 1952, so it was almost half a century after his death, and he was completely unknown, and his music was not being performed at all. So tell me why, let me tell you why that happened. Bortkiewicz was born in Kharkiv in 1877. He was born in a Polish family. His parents were noble Polish people, quite wealthy. His father, Edward Bortkiewicz, owned a distillery in Kharkiv, out of all businesses. And the business was going really well, so he was a very wealthy person. And Bortkiewicz's mother, her name was Zofia Ushinska. She was an amateur pianist and apparently quite skillful and talented. So from a childhood, Bortkiewicz was exposed to all the music in his house and also in Kharkiv, because Kharkiv was a big cultural center, currently the second largest city in Ukraine. And back then, all the greatest musicians would come and play in Kharkiv. And for example, as a boy, Bortkiewicz heard Tchaikovsky conduct his own symphonies in Kharkiv. So this family could afford the best education for their son, and they sent him off to St. Petersburg, to the Imperial Conservatory of Music, where he studied for 3 years, and then he dropped off. He did his military service and decided to continue his musical education in Germany, city of Leipzig, where he studied with a famous pianist. His name was Alfred Eisenhower, and that pianist was a student of great Franz Liszt. So Bortkiewicz is, in a way, Liszt's musical grandson. And he graduated from Leipzig Conservatory with distinction, with an honor. It's called the Schumann Medal. That's the sort of honor that was given to the students of that conservatory, the most talented students of that conservatory. And it's interesting that it's called a Schumann Medal, because at that point of his life, Bortkiewicz was writing music very much inspired by the German Romantic composers, and particularly by Robert Schumann. And I want to play a piece which is called The Midnight. And if you're familiar with Schumann music, I think it reminds a lot of one of the pieces from Schumann's Fantasiestücke, particularly one which is called Indernacht, which means in the night. So we have this night, midnight imagery. On one hand, it's a time of some spooky supernatural activity, but on the other time, it's a time of romance, and you can hear both in this piece. So I think you get a pretty good idea of his style. What I think is really striking that even in the very stormy and dark pieces, he still manages to include a lot of lyricism. So even here in this piece, you can hear really beautiful lyrical melodies, and that's just how his style is. It's always full of lyricism. So back to Bortkewicz's life. He lived he graduated from Leipzig, and he got a teaching position in Berlin. He got married, he moved to Berlin. It was 1904, and looks like everything is just going really well for him. He's a professor at the conservatory. He's performing as a pianist all over Europe, and his music is being published and performed, so everything is really going well for him for about 10 years. But in 1914, the First World War breaks out, and after that, his life is all just a sequence of really unfortunate and tragic events. So first, he and his wife get arrested by the German police as the citizen of the enemy Russian Empire, and they get deported from Germany. They go back to Kharkiv, where they live for the next 5 years, and they oversee the First World War and the collapse of the Russian Empire, and then emerges the short-lived Ukrainian People's Republic. And then the Bolsheviks come, and the Bolsheviks invade Kharkiv in 1919. And for them, Bortkiewicz is a natural enemy because he is a landowner, he's wealthy, he has factories. So they take his factories, they call it nationalize them. They pillage his estate, his house in Kharkiv and nearby Kharkiv. And he has to run away, leaving everything behind. He runs with his wife first to Crimea. And then, with some strike of luck there, he meets the American Navy officer who loves music, and they become friends, and this American officer helps him to get a spot on a ship that sails to Constantinople. And that's how he gets there with his wife, this successful musician. This wealthy person ends up in Constantinople with $20 in his pocket and nothing else left from his whole previous life. So he and his wife Elizabeth, they basically live on the street for some time. They don't have anywhere to go. And then again, what's interesting about his life, there are always people, even during all these hardships, there are always people who are willing to help him. The court musician of the Turkish Sultan knows Bortkewicz's music, and somehow he gets the word that this composer is here in town. He's struggling, so he helps him. He organizes a concert for him. He finds students for Bortkiewicz to teach privately, and Bortkiewicz manages to save enough money to make his way from Constantinople first to Belgrade, to Sofia, and finally to Vienna. So now he's in Vienna, and he's a person without a citizenship. The Russian Empire doesn't exist. The Ukrainian People's Republic has fallen. So he settles in Vienna for a while, and he wants to make his way back to Berlin, the city that was his home once. And he succeeds, and he moves there in 1932. But you all know what happens in 1933. The Nazis come to power in Berlin. And for them, though he's not Jewish, but he's still the subhuman, right? He's from Ukraine, and they don't want his works to be performed. They don't want him to play there, to write music. So all his performances got canceled. All his projects of publishing works get canceled. All his manuscripts get lost somewhere in those publishing houses. And he has to move again, and he goes back to Vienna. Unfortunately, not too far. You know, many other famous musicians of the time, they managed to move to America and then build a new career there, like Rachmaninoff or Stravinsky. But Bortkiewicz got stuck in Vienna, and Vienna was occupied by the Nazis just shortly after, in 1938. And at that point, Bortkiewicz was already too tired to run, and he stayed there under the Nazi occupation, and he survived the Second World War, really having a miserable existence there because he couldn't find any job, and he had to constantly write to his friends and ask for help. And I can't even imagine how hard that must have been for him as a person with pride, you know, aristocratic person who doesn't really want to ask for help. But he survived, and there is a letter, I don't quote, but in my own words, he writes to his friend, Dutch pianist Hugo van Dalen, and he says that, I'm writing to you from the floor of my bathroom, because that is the only place that I can get warm with the candlelight, because everything else is cold and freezing and it's impossible to endure. So he's laying on the floor on the bathroom and writing this letter. So it's really heartbreaking to read those letters. He says at some point that I would already take my own life, finish the soul, because this is miserable, but I'm worried about my wife, Elizabeth, and his wife had mental issues, so he says she wouldn't survive without me, so that's the only reason why I keep doing this. But in any case, he survived, though the house where he lived got bombed by the British air raid, and a lot of his manuscripts were lost in fire, including her opera, the whole opera, The Acrobats, which is lost completely. Not even one note survived from that manuscript. But he survived. He lived through the war, and after the war he got appointed as a professor and the dean of teaching department of the Vienna Conservatory. So finally he got some recognition in the end of his life, and when he turned 75, it was the last year of his life, 1952, Society of Lovers of Bortkewicz's Music, there was a society of people who loved his music in Vienna, and they organized a big concert for him. They rented the Musikverein, one of the biggest concert halls in Vienna. They got the orchestra soloists, and they said, basically, do whatever you want. And he conducted his symphony, and one of his concertos performed. And it was a big success. And again, he writes in a letter about it, and again, I don't quote, I just, in my own words, he's very happy. He says, that was a great success, and finally people could see who I am. And even my close people, my close friends were shocked by this, and he is really proud. He writes it as such an achievement, but it sounds really bitter too, because you have to live 75 years, and even the closest people don't really know what gift, what kind of talent you have. So that is, in a way, really sad. And he died that same year, 1952. He died, and he is buried in Vienna. And after that, Bortkiewicz Society existed for for 2 decades, and they tried to perform his music and publish his music, but then it dissolved. I think everyone from the society passed away, all his friends, everyone who knew him, and then after that, his music was not performed anymore. Interesting thing that his persecution didn't end with his life, because a lot of his music was still in Leipzig. There was a publishing house in Leipzig where he sent it in 1933, before the Nazis took over Germany. And he wanted these works to be published, and they got stuck in that publishing house, in the archives or whatever, because Nazis banned all of this music. And then later, after the war, Leipzig went under in the zone of the Soviet occupation. So the Soviet authorities were looking for all the documents, everything they could find there, and they found his music. And of course, they banned it too, just like how the Nazis did. So that big chunk of his music written in those years, in the late 20s and early 30s, was laying in the archives somewhere in Leipzig until the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. And only after that, people got access, musicologists and historians got access to that music. And some of these works are still being found today, and there are people in the world who are looking for his lost manuscripts all over the world in different archives and different libraries. And some of his work is still being found, and maybe there's still a hope that some of those works we consider lost will still be located and performed and published. During his lifetime, musicians, his colleagues actually valued him pretty highly, especially before the World War II. One of those musicians was Moritz Rosenthal, one of the greatest pianists of the first half of the 20th century. Rosenthal, who was a Polish Jew with Austrian citizenship and born in Lviv, in the western Ukrainian city of Lviv. And the Bortkiewicz, the Polish, Ukrainian, born in Kharkiv, citizen of the Russian Empire, they met in Germany and they spoke to each other in German. I'm just saying that probably sounds funny, but if you want to understand something about Ukrainian culture and history, you need to know that it's very complicated and very tangled in a way. So these two people, if they were born today, they would live in the same country, but back then they were citizens of 2 different empires, and they spoke German to each other. And Rosenthal was making a recording on this Welteminion devices. There was no sound recording back then. And there were these player pianos that basically you can record your performance, and then the piano just plays without you exactly the same way. So that greatest pianists of the time were making those recordings, and Moritz Rosenthal recorded his standard repertoire, his pieces Chopin and Liszt, and then he decided to record one etude by Bortkiewicz. And Bortkiewicz was thrilled beyond belief because he thought that's how his music is going to be, to live forever now, because it's been actually recorded. Again, it was a complete high-tech and something unimaginable for that time yet. So he was very happy, and he wrote a cycle of lamentations and consolations and dedicated it to Rosenthal as a sign of gratitude. I want to play a part of this cycle. Cycle consists of two mini cycles. Lamentation and consolation are two movements. So he wrote 4 of those little cycles. So I want to play one of them. 2 movements. The lamentation is rather stormy and dramatic, and the consolation is again very, very lyrical. To give you another example of how highly other musicians, Bortkewicz's contemporaries, valued him, there was this German pianist, Paulie Wittgenstein. He was a pianist who lost his right arm in the World War I. And after the war, he was approaching composers who he thought were the best composers of the time and commissioning them to write a concerto for piano and orchestra for the left hand alone. So he approached Richard Strauss, Benjamin Britten, Maurice Ravel, Serhiy Prokofiev, and Serhiy Bortkevych. And Wittgenstein had very conservative views on music. Just like Bortkiewicz, they both didn't have much appreciation for the modern music. They didn't really like the movements of the new music, the New Viennese school, the Schoenberg, Alban Berg, Prokofiev, not that much either. So even though he commissioned Prokofiev to write this concerto for him, he rarely played it. He didn't really want to play it so much. But he really loved Bortkewicz's concerto because Bortkiewicz wrote in the style of the same romantic music, the old great masters of the romantic classical music that Wittgenstein also loved. So he performed his concerto very often. He really loved it, and it was always very successful performance. It's Bortkewicz's second piano concerto. He wrote 3 in total, all really wonderful pieces. He also wrote symphonies. He wrote concerto for violin and for cello. He wrote a lot of music. He wrote vocal cycles on German and French poetry, and of course, really a huge amount of piano solo music. And all this music has just been laying somewhere for a long time, until very, very recent. But some music that was published early in the 20th century in Germany, when he lived in Berlin for the first time, that music was still around in Europe, and it made its way to America. So you could actually hear some of it performed here, and I could hear some of it performed here even before I knew who the composer was. In particular, because he wrote a lot of wonderful music for children, which is really interesting. He didn't have his own children, but he wrote several cycles that are really, really great for studying music, for imagination. Some of these cycles are not that easy to play. I want to show you this one cycle in particular because it's not really that much as for children as it's about his own childhood. It's called From My Childhood, so it's a rather autobiographical piece. And it has 6 short movements in it. The first movement is called What My Nanny Sang. And that is basically an arrangement of a Ukrainian folk song, Віють вітри, a very popular Ukrainian folk song. Віють вітри, віють буйні, аж дерева гнуться, о, як болить моє серце, аж сльози ллються. So this is the first movement of this suite, just a piano arrangement of that song. Then the second movement is called The Dark Room, and it has something to do with the kids' fear of darkness. Right? It squeaks and shadows, and you can hear it all in the music. The third movement is called the Dance Lesson, and as I imagine back then when he was growing up, everyone from the higher society, they had to know how to do ballroom dancing, so he had to take some classes. And in this third movement, you can hear the rather awkward little boy trying to make his moves, and he doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know how to dance with waltz that he's trying to waltz, and you can hear all that in the music. I think he just wrote it really marvelously, this piece. The fourth movement is called First Love, followed by the First Sorrow, the fifth movement, and the last movement is called When I Grow Up, and it's a sort of self-ironic way how Bortkiewicz describes the child's view of adults. Who are always busy, always in a hurry, always rushing, kind of full of themselves, think that they do something very, very important all the time. It's a fun piece, and then the theme from the movement First Love comes back in the end of it. And in the music he says, he writes, "She will be my wife." That accompanies the music. So, and it's true because he married his wife Elizabeth, and she was his sister's childhood friend. So he knew her since he was a little boy, and then they got married, and they were married until the very end of their life. So he basically is trying to tell us about his own life in his own words, or rather in his own music. And let's hear the From My Childhood piano suite. This music is written in a more simpler language than the other pieces, I would say. But I don't know if it's if I can say this it's worse than his in quote serious pieces, because I think this is just wonderful and with a lot of humor and self-irony, very witty and not easy to play, even though it's considered for children. Yeah, I love to give some of these pieces to my students, and they played in some auditions or competitions, and usually get really great reaction from the judges who say, "Wait a minute, where did you get this music? I want it right away," because everyone loves to hear these pieces. I want to play another cycle for you now, completely different music, and I want to tell a few words about how I encountered Bortkiewicz first. It was in 2016, I believe, and I was looking for a certain piece to include my program of Ukrainian music. I wanted the piece to be connected to Crimea because of the obvious reasons. I'm sure you'll understand. Something about Crimea. So I was looking all over the place and couldn't think of anything. And then I found this piece which is called Crimean Sketches, suite of 4 pieces. I found it online. It's on public library online. And by a composer whose name was not familiar to me and looked Polish, Bortkiewicz with CZ in the end. And I thought, that's how fascinating. Is there a Polish composer who wrote about Crimea? And immediately I thought about Adam Mickiewicz, who wrote Crimean Sonnets, cycle of poetry. And I thought, interesting if there a Polish poet writing about Crimea, and maybe a Polish composer writing about Crimea. So I opened this music, and from the very first few notes, I realized this is exactly what I need. This is exactly what I was looking for. This glorious, beautiful music. Then I decided I need to know more about this composer, and how embarrassed I was when I realized he was from Kharkiv, and he never lived in Poland ever. He lived in Kharkiv. He's from Ukraine, and I don't know anything about him. So that's how I started looking up more information, and I found more of his music and ended up recording a whole CD of his music because just couldn't stop playing it. And this is the Crimean Sketches, a suite of 4 pieces. He traveled to Crimea when he was really young. He had relatives who lived there, so he knew Crimea quite well. And then, of course, later he was escaping with his wife from the Bolsheviks through Crimea. But this was written earlier than that. It was written when he was still living in Berlin in the beginning of 20th century. And 4 movements. First one is called The Rocks of Uchkosh. It took me several days to understand what it means, because in original music that was published almost 100 years ago, or probably more than 100 years ago, the titles are all in French. And the Uchkosh is like 15 letters. So there was no disrespect to the French language, but I typed it in Google and there was no results for that. So I actually had to, it was a puzzle for me. I spent several days, and then finally I just took the map of Crimea and I found there is Uchkosh, which of course looks much shorter than in French, but it's a place close to the city of Yalta. It's on the south of Crimea, mountain sort of terrain there, apparently very beautiful. And this piece is Rocks of Uchkosh is a true ode to the Crimean nature, to the mountains, to the pine forests, and of course you can also see the Black Sea in it too. The second piece is called the Capreses of the Sea, and again that's about the sea, solely about that, and about this sea that changes the mood. Sunny sea, stormy sea, it's kind of, it changes all the time, and it's playing with you, and it's a very happy piece and brings me a lot of memories from my childhood, because I spent every summer with my parents, I spent in Crimea, and this is something that just brings wonderful memories for me. The third piece, the Oriental Idyll, and this is a depiction of the Crimean native population, the Crimean Tatars, how Bortkiewicz saw them. It has a subtitle, Walking in Alupka, the city of Alupka, also on the southern shore of Crimea, and lots of Crimean Tatars live there. So the third piece, the Oriental Idyll, is about that. And the last one, with the most peculiar title, Chaos. And again, I couldn't understand what that is about, what kind of chaos he's talking about, some kind of abstract chaos. The piece is very stormy, with a little fugato section in the middle. So that was puzzling to me, why why this is called chaos. And I didn't understand it until I went to Ukraine and until I played the whole concert of Bortkewicz's works in Kyiv. And I said similar thing. I said I don't know what this chaos is about. And my first teacher music teacher from grade school approached me after the concert, and she said, "You don't know there is a national park in Crimea which is called Chaos. It's next to the city of Alupka." And again, the subtitle is Walking in Alupka. And that's apparently in Crimea, millions of years ago, there was a volcano eruption and a huge boulders of lava are laying around in a sort of chaotic order. And now it's a national park which is called Chaos. So that is what this piece is about. So that's how I found out, because I already played the whole concert and my first teacher told me about that. And I've been to Crimea many, many times, and I never seen that place. And I'm really fascinated, and I hope that one day I will be able to go back to the Ukrainian Crimea and see it with my own eyes. So the Crimean sketch is a suite of four movements. I have one more piece to play before we finish. But I want to say this. Bortkiewicz, as you could see from his life, lived through a lot of incredibly hard events. He survived 2 world wars. He was a lifetime refugee. He was being chased by the Bolsheviks, and then he was banned by the Nazis. A lot of really heartbreaking things in his biography. But still he survived. And not only he managed to keep composing, and he left a lot of works for us to enjoy. And even though these works remained mainly unknown, right now they're being rediscovered and they're being performed. His music started to be recorded a lot lately. Even there was a festival of his music in Kyiv 3 years ago, 5 nights in a row, his piano music, his chamber music, his vocal music, and the last one was the symphony music with his symphony being performed, and newly discovered orchestral suite had a world premiere, and every time it was full house and people were very enthusiastic to hear this music and to learn more about this composer who was forgotten for so long. So right now it's sort of a renaissance of his music, and I really hope that after few more years or maybe a decade, he will take his rightful place among the Ukrainian composer and also among the world great romantic composer, because I really think that this music has to be heard, has to be performed along with all other great piano and other romantic music. This last piece is a consolation in E-flat major. It's from the same cycle as that Lamentation consolation I played earlier, dedicated to Moritz Rosenthal, the great pianist. And I just want to thank you for being here today. It's been almost a year since I played for a live audience, so thank you very much for coming. I missed this, and this is exciting. And to those who are watching online, thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something new, and I hope you enjoyed his music. Thank you for your time. I hope to see you live too. So that Consolation in E-flat major by Bortkiewicz.
Thank you very much, Pavel, and that was just so moving. It's such a privilege to be in a live audience. I'm really very choked up, actually. It reminds me of a quote that says, after silence, the thing that comes nearest to expressing the inexpressible is music, and I certainly experienced that here today. I'm Kathy Nalabayko, president of the Ukrainian Institute of America, and I'd like to express our deepest gratitude to Pavel Gintov for this amazing concert, such an inspiration in the middle of a Sunday afternoon. Thank you to all of the limited audience members that we were able to accommodate today for joining us, and I'm sure that you were as moved as I was, because this was really fantastic. You know, these halls have been silent for so long, and it's great to have live music here again. I'd like to thank a couple of people and organizations that helped make today possible. Thank you to the Shevchenko Scientific Society, their president Helena Hrin, and their first vice president Virka Ballet for collaborating with us on this concert and project. Thank you to all of our supporters of the Music at the Institute series. Thank you for all of the supporters of the Ukrainian Institute of America in general. Many thanks to our brilliant and fabulous director of the Music at the Institute program, Dr. Serhiy Bortkevych, for never giving up and forging ahead and always coming up with something great for us to experience and to listen to. I'd like to thank our 2020 to 2021 season sponsors, the Self-Reliance New York Federal Credit Union, Mr. Charles Podpirka, and the Chopivsky Family Foundation. I'd like to thank our our production partners, Our Concerts Live, for working with us to produce such high-quality concerts that we can stream live and make available to people afterwards. Thank you to the staff of the Ukrainian Institute that keeps this place going and accommodates our ability to continue our programs, albeit on a limited basis from a live perspective. I feel like I forgot somebody else, so I'm going to take my notes out and just make sure that I didn't forget anybody. And of course, again, thank you to everybody here for being here. Thank you to everybody in our virtual audience. I hope that you will continue to join us for these concerts, and we really do look forward to welcoming back everybody and filling this hall with hundreds of people, not a handful of people. So I don't know about you. I thought all the pieces were fantastic. The Crimean pieces to me really spoke to my heart, and I guess that's it. We have there's a little bit that will come after me, so don't disconnect from your computers yet. We have a finishing slideshow that's going to come up, and again, thank you very much for your support. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon.
Thank you for watching this live broadcast from the Ukrainian Institute of America. Please kindly note this concert will be available on our Concerts Live and Ukrainian Institute of America websites. Also, you may watch a November 9th performance from the Ukrainian Institute of America presented by Marty on Ukrainian Institute of America YouTube channel. Please follow Ukrainian Institute of America on social media to receive updates on our events, including on our YouTube channel, Facebook page, Instagram, and Twitter. We can't wait to welcome you back at the Ukrainian Institute of America. Until now, please be safe, and thank you for watching. Дякую.